Hi, I'm David Ryan Polgar. I'm often referred to as a tech ethicist. I look about how technology impacts us from an ethical, legal, and emotional perspective. I'd like to talk about this concept of mental obesity that I've talked about over the years. Really, mental obesity is this feeling that we get when we are mentally cloudy. I think a lot of us can relate to it, and I can relate to it. I even got into thinking about how technology was impacting us, oftentimes creating this very superficial type of thinking, when I forgot my phone at a jury duty in 2012. And when I forgot my phone, I was still hearing and feeling ringing in my pocket, and I'd reach for my phone and there would be nothing in there. And I said, well, what is going on here? Like, am I going crazy? Like, there's no phone, but I'm still feeling the ringing. When I went back after the jury duty and researched this, Googled it like anybody would, I realized that this is phantom rings, and that 67% of Americans, according to Pew Research, have experienced these phantom rings. And that was really my epiphany moment, where I said, I need to make this my life's work, that technology is impacting us, and we're having these externalities in such a drastic way that this is something that we need to do something about. We need to have some counter-revolution to this. The idea of mental obesity really is that because we're consuming so much information, oftentimes I like to use the analogy or metaphor of hungry hippo, right? From an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are trained to just consume. There's nothing that's going to tell us, well, shut this off, right? Nobody ever finishes the internet. We never say, hey, you have to read the internet. It was hilarious, right? It's never done. But from a human standpoint, we are going to continue consuming it, because as a lot of people have mentioned, we design the internet, we design the very idea of hyperlinks and a lot of our apps to be contagious in nature, and a lot of people talk about the slot machine type of mentality. What I'm doing with mental obesity and something I started called a mental food plate is I'm trying to create a simple visualization for better understanding holistically about how technology is impacting our cognitive abilities. Really, what the mental food plate is supposed to be kind of a solution, let's say, for mental obesity, is that we need to treat our cognitive skills in a very similar fashion as we're treating our body. And that's why we use some of the similar terms like a digital diet or a digital detox. With the mental food plate, we're actually breaking it down and saying, okay, we need to assess every once in a while. We need to reflect upon our own skills, right? Similar to how you might weigh yourself on a scale. We need to actually sit back and say, how is my thinking? This kind of stepping back and really analyzing ourselves. But then you also have this idea of mindful consumption. I think that's kind of the wave of the future, is being a little more deliberate with how we're using the technology, being agnostic about it. It's neither good nor bad, but we can consume it differently. And I think this goes against the grain that a lot of times people like to ask anybody in this field, how many hours a day should I use the internet, or should I do X, Y, and Z? And that's like asking the meaning of life, right? There's no actual answer to it. Technology is too much if it's impacting whether or not you can have a relationship with your friends and family, whether or not you feel mentally cloudy, whether or not you can have that deep level of thought, whether or not you can go back and write poetry, right? We need to reach that deeper level, and as opposed to being superficial. And that's why normally when you look at the scale, it kind of goes from the data to information to knowledge to wisdom. We need to kind of get to that lower level. And we only get there by reflecting upon information as opposed to constantly consuming it. And again, that's where the food analogy is kind of apropos, right? We don't consume food continuously. We occasionally digest that food. Likewise, when do we digest the information? And that's where, again, the mental food plate comes in. And that's really the main other aspect of this is reflection. I really think if there's one area we're not doing enough of in the 21st century, it's reflection. We're not lacking for great content. There's amazing books that I have on my nightstand. There's tons of articles that I have kind of in my queue to read. We're not lacking for brilliant information or for brilliant videos. What we are lacking for is reflecting upon this, watching a video and then reflecting upon that video and then talking to your friends, to your loved ones, to your neighbors, and to actually digest it to the point that you can have an original thought. Because that's what creativity is, right? That's what critical thinking is by having this divergent type of thinking, by connecting dots, right? We don't need to just consume, we need to connect dots if we're going to push forward new ideas. And that's really what we want to consider. And then the last part for mental obesity with this mental food plate is this kind of brain exercise, if you will. So really when you kind of tie it together, it's very similar to how you might think about your body. 20th century, I think, was all about maximizing the body, the rise of gyms and healthy eating. Whereas I think the 21st century, when we're moving forward, is going to be about the brain, right? We're knowledge workers. We need to focus on our cognitive abilities. So I think that's where mental obesity comes into play. And really, I was inspired, I think as a lot of people were, by the 2008 article in The Atlantic by Nicholas Carr called "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" But I think a lot of people are kind of taking that torch and moving it forward, and I hope to be one of those people moving it forward.